The alarms had not stopped screaming for 6 minutes when I stepped off the transport and asked why nobody was moving toward the east wing of the station. Nobody answered me. A tall alien with silver skin and wide black eyes just stared at me like I had asked him to walk into a furnace. His name tag read, Voss. He worked security. His hands were shaking. I am Daniel Marsh, and until that day I thought my job on this station was simple. I fixed broken air filters and hauled supply crates. I was not a soldier. I was not a scientist. I was just a man, doing a job far from home, on a station built by a dozen species who did not trust each other, but somehow trusted humans even less, and feared something else even more. That something else was behind 3 sealed doors. At the end of a hallway nobody walked down. I found out about the doors within an hour of arriving. A young alien engineer named Lyra, from a species with pale blue skin and long fingers, grabbed my arm when she saw me looking down that hallway. Her grip was tight enough to bruise. "Do not go that way," she said. "Nobody goes that way." I asked her why. She looked at me like I had said something insane. "Because of them," she whispered. "The 3. The forbidden ones." I laughed, thinking it was some kind of local superstition. She did not laugh back. Her eyes were wet with fear, real fear, the kind that does not fake itself. That night, the station was hit by a power failure, not a small one. Every light in the east wing died at once, including the ones sealing that hallway. The emergency systems should have kicked in immediately, but something drained them dry in seconds. Alarms shrieked through every corridor. Aliens ran in every direction except toward the danger. That is when I noticed something strange. Nobody was running to check on the 3 doors. They were running away from them. I asked the station commander, a broad-shouldered alien named Thorn, what was actually behind those doors. He looked at me the way you look at someone who just admitted they do not know fire burns. 3 creatures, he said. Ancient. Older than any records we have. Centuries ago, an entire military unit went in to study them. Only silence came back. Since then, no one touches those doors. No one speaks to them. No one even looks at them directly on the security feeds if they can help it. We keep them contained, and we pray they stay that way. I asked what happened to the soldiers who went in. He said nobody truly knows. Some reports say they died standing still, eyes open, as if something reached inside their minds and simply turned off the switch. Other reports say worse. Whatever the truth is, every species that has ever encountered these 3 creatures agrees on one thing. You do not approach them. You do not speak to them. And above all, you never touch them. The power failure got worse before it got better. Something inside that sealed section was pulling energy from the entire station, like a heartbeat growing louder and faster. The lights along the corridor began flickering in a pattern, almost like breathing. Alarms turned into evacuation warnings, and still, nobody moved toward the doors, because moving toward the doors meant facing whatever was causing this. I stood there in the shaking corridor, crates forgotten, alarms drowning out every thought except one very simple question. If everyone keeps running away, who is going to find out what is actually happening? Lyra grabbed my sleeve again as I started walking. Her voice cracked. "Daniel, please. You do not understand what you are doing." I told her I did not understand, and that was exactly the problem. Fear does not explain itself. It just spreads. I wanted to know what was actually behind 3 sealed doors that could apparently drain an entire station of power and make grown soldiers with weapons refuse to move. She did not follow me. Neither did anyone else. The corridor grew colder the closer I got. The emergency lights buzzed weakly above me, barely holding on. When I reached the first door, I noticed something the reports never mentioned. Faint markings were carved into the metal, old and worn, shaped almost like open hands reaching upward. Not weapons, not warnings shaped like threats, something closer to a plea. The door was already unlocked. The power failure had done that much. I pushed it open slowly, my heart pounding harder than it had in years, and stepped inside. The chamber was massive, far larger than I expected, dimly lit by dying emergency lights. And there, chained to the floor by thick restraints that looked ancient and corroded, were the 3 creatures. They were enormous, easily 3 times my height, with long limbs and skin like cracked stone, glowing faintly with veins of soft blue light. Their heads were lowered. Their chests rose and fell slowly. They were not attacking. They were not moving at all, except for that slow, heavy breathing. I expected monsters. What I saw instead were three beings that looked utterly exhausted, as if they had been standing in that same position for longer than I could imagine. One of them lifted its head. Its eyes were pale gold, and when they met mine, I did not feel fear crawl into my mind like everyone warned. I felt something closer to surprise, its own surprise, staring back at me. Every instinct told me to run. Every warning from every terrified alien on this station echoed in my skull. But something else, something quieter, told me these creatures were not hunting me. They were watching me the way a starving animal watches food it does not expect to receive kindly. I took a step closer. The restraints around the nearest creature's wrist had cracked open slightly during the power failure, but it had not moved to escape. It could have. It chose not to. I reached out my hand slowly, the way you would approach something wounded rather than something dangerous, and I touched its arm. Nothing exploded. My mind did not shatter. No invisible force reached inside my skull and turned off the lights. Instead, I felt warmth spreading from where my palm rested against its skin, and for just a moment, I saw something that was not mine. A flash of images, faint and broken, like an old memory struggling to surface. A world full of color, voices, many voices, laughing, then fire, then silence. Then centuries of that same silence, stretching on and on inside a locked room, while the galaxy outside decided they were monsters and never asked why. The creature made a sound, low and rough, almost like a sigh someone had been holding in for a very long time. The second creature lifted its head too, watching us. The third one, chained slightly apart from the others, let out a soft sound that might have been the beginning of something like relief. I understood then, without needing words, that fear was the only weapon these creatures had ever truly carried. Not against us. Against the terror everyone else radiated the moment they came near. Every soldier who had entered this room before me had walked in already braced for death, already broadcasting panic with every racing heartbeat. And these creatures, whatever they were, could feel that fear like a wave crashing against them, again and again, until it became something violent simply by reaction. I had walked in without that fear, not because I was fearless, but because curiosity had quieted it enough to let something else through, and it turned out that was the only thing they had ever needed. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Lyra stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the scene in front of her with her mouth open. Thorn arrived seconds later, weapon raised, then lowering slowly as he saw me standing calmly, with my hand resting against a creature that supposedly killed anyone who came near it. He asked, voice barely above a whisper, how I was still alive. I told him the truth. I did not come in here expecting a monster. I came in here expecting an answer. The creature beside me lowered its head gently, almost like a bow, and the restraints around its wrist fell away completely, the metal too corroded to hold any longer. It did not lunge, it did not attack. It simply reached out one long clawed hand and rested it, carefully, against my shoulder, the same way you comfort someone after a long and terrible night. Word spread through the station faster than the power failure had. Within an hour, dozens of aliens stood at the edge of that hallway, staring in disbelief at a human, standing calmly among the three creatures every species in the galaxy had learned to fear for generations. Some of them cried, some of them simply could not speak. Thorn ordered a full medical and historical team to study the chamber properly for the first time in centuries, this time without weapons drawn first. Lyra stood beside me for a long while, staring at the creatures with an expression somewhere between shame and wonder. She asked me quietly how I knew it would be safe. I told her I did not know. I just refused to let fear decide the answer before I had even asked the question. Over the following days, more of the story came out. The three creatures were the last of their kind, survivors of a war so old that most records of it had crumbled to dust, sealed away out of panic rather than proof, forgotten inside their own silence while their reputation grew into something far larger and far darker than the truth ever was. They were not weapons. They were not monsters. They were simply alone, for longer than anyone else on that station had even been alive, waiting for someone to walk in without expecting the worst. I still fix air filters. I still haul crates across a station full of species that look at me differently now, some with respect, some with quiet unease at what a single unarmed human did without hesitation. But sometimes, when my shift ends, I walk down that same hallway, past doors that no longer stay locked, and I sit with three creatures who spent centuries being feared for simply existing. They do not speak in words I understand, not yet, but they do not need to. Every time I sit beside them, the silence feels a little less heavy than the day before. Turns out the most terrifying thing in that entire station was never behind those doors at all. It was the fear everyone carried into that hallway before they ever had the chance to look inside.